This is our session on WHMCS. I'm Taylor. This is Pilot. I'm pointing the wrong direction.
It's
This is
correct,
Pilot
but
over there. um, and we're going to walk you through, really, Pilot is going to do the bulk of the driving here, and I'm here for, I think the technical term is color commentary in the sports
moral
industry, I believe.
support.
Yeah, moral support. Um, Walk you through WHMCS, kind of where it fits in the
Mhm.
domain of one's own um, management,
Ecosystem.
ecosystem. That's a good word. I would say puzzle, but I don't want to make it sound confusing. But there is like layers to all this stuff, right? Like we talked earlier in the day about kind of how the three big systems fit and sort of what roles they play, with WordPress being the front end. Um, and we're going to get to WHMCS in a second, and that's really about managing users in the system and what they have access to, and if they have accounts and things like that. And then later on, we'll talk about WHM, which is kind of more the servery stuff,
Mhm.
basically. But so I kind of think of WHMCS as kind of, I liked in my head, I think of these as layers, and right, the outer layer being WordPress, a one layer down is WHMCS, and WHM is even one further. So we're going to talk about WHMCS. That's stands for Web Host Management Complete Solution. Terrible name.
I don't like that. I don't like
Yeah,
that at all.
yeah, it's a bad name. And we're gonna kind of walk through it. And if you have any questions while we go, feel free to put them in Discord. And yeah, so I'm gonna get Pilot's screen up here, and
Mhm.
we'll showcase WHMCS.
Yeah. All right. So basically, we've talked a little bit about this before. As Taylor said, we talked about how the three systems work together. Amanda and I mentioned WHMCS a little bit in our WordPress uh, session, but the main thing to think about WHMCS as I like to think of the domain of one's own system as layers, where WordPress is the outer layer. It's what you'll be using the most often. It's what the users will see and have access to. Uh, WHM, the server, is the innermost part that'll have the nitty gritty settings. It's where data is stored, things like that. And Taylor and I will talk about that a little bit later. But WHMCS is the middle, it's the bridge, it connects everything. It's responsible for making single sign on work with WHM, and just having everything hook up cleanly. Um, so the idea of single sign-on is used in WordPress so that users can sign in with the credentials that they know. They don't need to learn any new credentials for their cPanels. And WHMCS is responsible for taking that information and going, single sign-on to this account means deliver this cPanel from the server, make it available in WordPress. WHMCS is also responsible for the original provisioning of accounts. So earlier, Amanda and I showed off what it looks like for a user to sign up, that sort of 10-second countdown that we were talking about. That is the time when WHMCS is saying to the server, hey, this user signed in, asked for this. Can you get it set up? And I'll send it right back. Um, I like WHMCS. I think it's fun. You aren't gonna need it too much. It's useful in long-term user management, particularly deprovisioning, which is something Taylor and I are going to talk about tomorrow. But that's just a good overview of how to think about WHMCS and what its role in the, as we said, ecosystem is. Um, so we're going to start with just the basics, and we're going to use me as a test case because if you can see, recently I set up a new account. That is the account that we set up in the WordPress. It's right down here in the corner. That's the account that we set up in the WordPress session with Amanda. Uh, and that's the example of when we were creating it then, WHMCS was getting everything set up over here. So let's just hop in. If you want to see the full client list, Client here means everyone who has ever signed into WordPress. If you sign into WordPress, even if you don't create a cPanel account, you are registered in WHMCS as someone who has touched the system. This is also useful because WordPress is great. It's super useful for on-the-ground troubleshooting, for managing all the day-to-day. It's not awesome in the keeping records and logs department, which is also what WHMCS is really good at. So if you want to see all of the users who have ever signed into WordPress, all of the things that they've done, you can go to View, Search Clients here, and it'll show you a big old list of everybody. I'm not going to go in there right now because stateu.org is our sandbox site that people use to test out domain of one's own, which means that there's just a whole bunch of people in there. And I already have the little account that I set up, so we can just go straight to that and show you what a user profile looks like. So we'll just type me in. I am extremely searchable. Nobody else ever has my name in the system. You can see I have a terminated account because I was testing
things. You don't have two first names like I do. So
I do not. Although I imagine Jaden's pretty searchable.
Kind of, but like I said, sometimes it's someone's first name, usually spelled with an E, though.
That's true. Yeah, I have two accounts listed here. One is terminated because I was testing some things earlier and then I got rid of it so that we could use me as a demo in the WordPress session. So here is just the overall summary page. You can see first name, last name, my email address, my address, which is not in the system because it's not really relevant. You don't need that. In your institution setup, the address here will be listed as the institution's address for every single user. WHMCS is by default a billing software. We actually use it to manage our own clients at Reclaim, but you don't need it you don't need billing for anything that we're doing, for anything that we use WHMCS for. So you can ignore that. Don't worry about it.
One thing I wanted to point out here too, before we go further in the profile, is that email address is importantly what single sign-on is looking for in almost every domain of one's own setup, right? So if that email address is not correct, or if it changes, the user won't be able to log in their account, and this is where you'd probably have to fix it. Or you can ask us at Reclaim, we can help you diagnose or fix it, right? But that comes up every once in a while. So.
Yeah, I believe we had an admin actually at one point who reached out to us because they had changed their name for personal reasons, lots of reasons to change your name, and changed their email accordingly, and then tried to sign into their account and went, oh no.
WHMCS was like, here's your new account if you want it, and they're like, no. So we just had to make sure that email matched up, and once that was the case, they're set. So sometimes we've had rare occasions too where a school has changed in bulk all like the format of all email addresses, and that also can affect it too, and in which case you'd reach out, we can help you with that change.
For sure. Yeah. So moving on from the email, you'll see, again, on the idea of this is a summary, this line up here, shared hosting, is just all of the cPanel accounts that I have ever signed up for. There's 2 total, 1 active, because as I said earlier, I terminated an account. I got rid of it so that Amanda and I could use my account as a demonstration for the sign up. The other thing is I talked earlier about WHMCS being a record of everyone who's ever signed into WordPress. That is an important distinction because our domain of one's own licenses come in blocks of 500. That is not 500 people in WHMCS. That is 500 cPanel accounts on the server, which is a different thing. People can sign into WordPress and get registered in WHMCS without ever actually creating their cPanel account. And so they will not count towards that license. this is a summary again, so you can scroll down and you can see people's accounts. This is the accounts. They also have options for domains if your school offers top-level domains, which is a pretty niche case, but it does happen. Those domains might be found here depending on your setup. Hopping over now, there's two tabs that I use really that I would use as a domain of one's own admin when I did that, which was products and services and log, and we'll get to that in a minute. So products and services is where you can look at the details for a specific account. So here is a list of all of the accounts that I have. The one that's been terminated is in red. That one no longer exists. But you can see that when it existed, it had this domain. It was on this server. It doesn't exist anymore, so you can't sign into it with cPanel. But it was registered on the 12th. It was terminated on the 12th. And these are all the options for managing it. We are going to, actually, we'll stay here. If we hopped to this, it would look exactly the same, be 100, no different at all. But we are gonna stay here because this account is terminated, so this username and password is useless, and this is being live recorded. So I don't want to show off more cPanel credentials.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's why it's terminated, right? We terminate these after shortly after workshops so that they're not just out there. But yeah.
So, information security, but also this account's going to go away in a day max. But so the next thing, or the big thing to look at here is the module commands. There's three main ones that would be relevant, and then a couple of others that I can talk about. So WHMCS is where we would do deprovisioning work. And the idea being that if there comes a time when a user no longer needs their cPanel account, either because they've graduated or they were using it for a course and they don't want it anymore, you would be able to use these commands to manage that. Suspension just suspends an account in that it makes it no longer publicly available. The account data still exists. The account is still on the server, but it's not something that users can access. It's not something that people can go to that domain and see the site. It's just offline.
And they'll get an error when they try to log in that says this account is suspended now. Yeah,
exactly. And so you might use suspension actually in the case of sometimes very, very infrequently. I think, I haven't worked here for 5 years, but the number I've heard is maybe once in the past 5 years. There comes a case where a user is posting things that the institution doesn't want associated with them or that violates the terms of use or something like that, maybe something risque. And that is a great time to suspend the account. You're not getting rid of the data yet, but then you can sit down with the user and say, hey, we maybe need to have a talk about this, about cleaning up your account, about not doing this, and maybe figuring out what next steps are. You can use that time to clean up the account, to figure out how the user is going to proceed, how the institution is going to proceed, and to bring that account back online, you just unsuspend, and it's as simple as that. Terminating does remove the account, fully gets rid of it, takes it off the server, the account data is gone. We keep backups for 30 days after an account is terminated, so within that time, we can restore an account that was mistakenly terminated if needed. But that after that, it's gone. Although we are happy to push those backups to a third-party location that the institution has. So, it doesn't have to be gone. In general, I do want to say that you don't have to do this manually. It's fine. Particularly in bulk. So if you are bulk deprovisioning in case of graduation, you can come to us and say, can you suspend these 150 accounts? I don't want to go through and press all the buttons myself because that sounds like a terrible use of my time. And we'll say, yeah, we have a script for that. We'll just run it. It'll just go like that.
And we'll talk about a lot more about deprovisioning and stuff like I mentioned earlier. We have a session tomorrow on that, but
Mhm.
it is, I think, good to kind of see this where it is in here, because there are times where you'll want to do one-off suspension, unsuspension, or termination, and this is where it lives. So
Yeah, exactly. So the module command, so those are the big three. There are also the module commands create, change package, and change password. I'm going to cover them really quickly. Change password, probably the most important of the three, in that sometimes the connection that WHMCS creates between the single sign-on in WordPress and the server will get unstuck. Will get unglued, rather, is sort of the way to put it. So a user will sign in and they're not getting an error message, they're basically just getting a blank screen because that cPanel embed has not come over from the server. That information hasn't delivered. And the first step in that situation is basically to come in here and hit change password, and that just rebuilds that bridge and recreates that connection. It can never hurt to do this. So this is a great first step for troubleshooting. That's still a more niche use case, so not part of the main three. Change package, we'll talk about this a bit later in the WHM session, but accounts can have different packages, which defines what resources are available to them, what the account settings are for them. And so if you wanted to change the package, we don't have an option for it here, but there would be an option to switch what that is and then hit the change package button, and that would swap them over on the server. That would control that. And then create. I've never heard of anyone using this. Create creates the account from scratch again. So it still exists, but it's blank. So if a user came to you and said, I love this. I've had a great time. This has been wonderful. I definitely want to keep using this, but I also want to get rid of everything I've ever done. I want a clean slate. I want to start from scratch. You could hit create and it would do that.
yeah, I would if I was in your shoes as an admin, I would be very, very explicit with them on mentioning what that means, because I think especially folks who are new to this, but even if you're not, it can be really confusing. Folks, end users, right? Students, faculty who are using their account, their cPanel account, to distinguish between, are we restarting a WordPress site or restarting the entire account? What's going to be changing here, right? So it is good, I think. I'd be very careful about pressing that button. Of course, backups could be restored if that needed to be done within 30 days. But yeah, it would be a weird request. Not that it hasn't happened. It definitely people will ask for that, but just make
Yeah.
sure before you click that button that they don't want to just restart a WordPress site, in which case they could do that in their cPanel with Installatron, and that they maybe have other things on their account, like a couple other sites or something like that. So
Yeah. I like to cover it because I like to make sure that you know what the buttons do so that you can
yeah.
choose whether or not you're pressing them.
Well, and it would be a
But
reasonable assumption to say, I bet that button doesn't work if the account's already created. It's like, no, it does.
it does. It does.
And it does something.
Yep. Only press that button if you are sure
Yeah,
that you
I
want
think
to
it
press
asks
it.
you to confirm, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the other thing that I really want to touch on is the log. So earlier I talked about how WordPress is really great for troubleshooting, for going into checking on users' accounts, things like that. It's not great for record keeping, but WHMCS is. So it's possible to do some of the account management stuff we've talked about in WHM. It's all manual there, basically. And it also doesn't enter into this log. So this is just useful in terms of keeping track of information. It says when things were created, it says when things are terminated. So you'll see that account was created. I got an email about it. That account was deleted. That account was created. I got an email about it. The new account has not yet been terminated. But you can see which admin was responsible for this. WHMCS does allow for multiple administrative accounts. So we recommend that everybody on your team has their own separate one linked to their own email, their own username. It says when it happened, which can be really useful just for tracking things down. We really, really, really recommend that if you were going to do user management in the ways that we've talked about, particularly suspension, unsuspension, termination, that you do it here, just so you can keep track of things. It's very, very useful.
Yeah, changes that you make here will apply to WHM, but changes that you make in WHM won't automatically apply back here, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a two-way between WHMCS and WHM, not a two-way conversation, it's a one-way conversation in
Yeah.
pretty much every case. So
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to see how much time we have. Taylor, do we have enough time to go into the emails? What do you think?
yeah, I think we do.
Okay, cool. So one of the nice things about WHMCS, in the same way that it's managing all of these users, all of these profiles, is that you have the option to send mass emails. And we'll also talk about this for communications purposes tomorrow in the deprovisioning session. But I'm just going to navigate to it right now. If you have this version of WHMCS, if your version of WHMCS looks like this is where you would find it, and this is the name, email campaigns under the utility section. If you have a different version of WHMCS, it's going to look a little different.
Yeah, it'll be in clients mass mail tool. Right?
Yeah, so this tab and then, mass mail tool isn't listed here, but if it were, that would be where you'd go. So you would, going to email campaigns, utilities, email campaigns allows the sending of an email message to a group of clients ranging from every client on file to those who meet specific criteria. What that means is pretty much what it sounds like. You can send an email to everyone in the system or a couple of people, depending. So WHMCS allows for things called client groups. So if you wanted to say, all right, everyone who is graduating in the class of, I guess, 2023, that's our school year now, everyone who's graduating in the class of 2023, their account goes into a client group, and then I'm going to send specific emails to them saying, oh, you're graduating soon. What do you want to do? This is why Taylor and I are going to talk about it in the deprovisioning session tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That's one of the really useful things about WHMCS in general. Taylor?
Yeah, it's just a fantastic tool. This email campaign or mass mail tool. Like I said, or like Pilot said, that we're gonna demo it more tomorrow a little bit, but just know that it is powerful because you get a nice email, like visual email templates and stuff that can be configured, but out of the box it will use a pretty good template that uses your school's logo is kind of built in there, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so that's nice. And obviously it can send a bunch of email at once, but then crucially, because it's like a mail merge tool, you can do things like include people's name and domain or account name if you wanted, all kinds of information in the email to personalize it, rather than just being
to whom it may concern.
Exactly. So that's great. It's built in. I think it's a really powerful tool for admins. It's also probably a good idea to make a client group and put yourself in it to do test emails. So you can just, make one that's just you or maybe you and a teammate that can, try the email out and then roll it out to everyone. It does give you nice previews, but I don't know. I'm always anxious when I'm about to hit the button on a bulk email, so I like to do double and triple checks. But it's a great tool, and we'll dig a little bit more into it tomorrow, hopefully. So
yeah, measure twice, cut once. That's, I think, most of what I wanted to cover in WHMCS. Is there anything you think we're missing?
The only other thing I wanted to mention is that I think is worth mentioning is maybe that this tool, you'd be provided with credentials to log in, but you can make other accounts for other folks who may need access on your team if that's the case. WHMCS lets you make accounts directly into the interface. You can share credentials if you want to, but I always think it's a better idea to have multiple people have their own logins. That way you can revoke a login if they leave. So
Yep.
that's possible. You can do it yourself. You can ask us to do it in a ticket, but it's very easy to just do via the manage admins page.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to do if you have someone else that needs to be in here and working with these accounts. So
For sure. And it also means, in addition to what Taylor said of, you can just revoke that if they end up leaving the institution. It's also great for that log that we were showing earlier, because there is that section that says this user, this admin is what was responsible for this action in the system.
Who did what here when? That can be a
It's just
lifesaver if you're
useful.
trying to, depending on the situation. So
Mhm.
yeah, awesome. Well,
All right.
anything else?
I don't think so. Can you stop my screen share, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's our tour of WHMCS, and up next is going to be WHM. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see you all soon.
See y'all soon.